Episode number 138 of Making the Case Why Integration Was Not Good for the So Called Black Person. Let's get it. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Making the Case. We're on episode number 138, and we're talking about why integration was not good for the so called black person. You already know who I am. I'm Dr. Jacob Isom, your host. We got two channel norms over here. One, we'll take points on our people, and then two, we don't do all the cussing derogatory stuff because we're professional over here. All right. Of course, today's topic is a oldie but goodie. It's not dominating the headlines now. This is a topic that has been talked about every which way, every angle you want to think about it. I do want to go over some comments from some well-respected people in the black community when it comes to talking about integration, and that is what our focus is going to be for today. And then, of course, I'm gonna add my 2 cents because I will be also making the case that integration was not good for the so-called black person. And of course, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know why I say so-called black person, because I just think it's a term that, of course, um, does not fit or represent who we are because black is a color, but it doesn't speak to a nationality. But that's a whole nother video that we can do. So, but as it relates to the topic though, when we say integration, of course, a lot of times we speak about it in terms of um, schooling, right? When the 1954 ruling that desegregated schools and made sure that black, white, and whoever was now going to school together, right? But of course, there's other facets of integration when you talk about economics, when you talk about social spheres and things of that nature. So we're going to touch on a little bit of everything, and hopefully, you get a better perspective of why in the past, present, and maybe future, people will say that integration wasn't that greatest thing for black people. As you can see, we're still struggling, right? Also, prior to desegregation or integration, whichever way you want to look at, there was different pockets of success for the so-called black person. Um, and we see that in smaller cities, also major cities, right? And one thing that segregation forced the so-called black person to do was to succeed and thrive, without anybody assistance or anybody help. So that would be a point that I would drive home because now, I mean, I think we play victim too much and want to make sure that somebody else can help us out in trying times. So, but without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into the conversation and let some other brothers, speak to it. And then I'll add my 2 cents. So let's get it.
World, and I wanted to take a second to talk about something that I think every black child in America needs to understand, and that is the massacre at Black Wall Street that occurred in 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. As you know, we created the new film Resurrecting Black Wall Street, and and basically this film really retraces what happened to those people who were in one of the most prosperous black communities throughout all of American history. It's a story that everybody needs to hear. And one thing I want to tell you real quick, and this really comes to mind right now, is that a lot of people call this the Tulsa Race Riot. It was not a riot. The Tulsa race riots were a massacre where hundreds of black people were killed, 10,000 people were left homeless, 600 businesses were destroyed, 1,256 residences were torn down. That was 35 total city blocks in one of the most prosperous black communities in history and arguably the most prosperous in the country. Basically, the the massacre that occurred at Black Wall Street is something that everybody needs to talk about. After it was over, the people were strong enough that they were able to rebuild, but the rebuilding was actually destroyed by integration. When the people in Tulsa, Oklahoma chose to rebuild, integration and urban renewal and highways and all these things that we consider to be progress led to yet another destruction of an amazing black legacy. So we have to ask ourselves, was integration really good for us as black people? Desegregation was wonderful for us, but was integration good for us? I don't think that it was. I think that we lost the ability and the desire to support one another and to build one another and to develop our own communities. So, what I say to you right now, in my opinion, and it's not just an opinion, I believe it is a fact. We must learn how to build in our communities. That means we must turn our energy inward instead of always looking to go outward. We must support each other instead of trying to support everybody else. We must create jobs for black people instead of creating a million jobs for white people. The fact is that when you don't support your community, when you don't love your own people, then you're about as worthless as a member of the clan. When you are working to destroy your community and to do things that are not healthy for the people that you love, then you're of no use to those individuals. So that's what I want to say to you. Our film is going to be released next month. You can pre-order this film at resurrectingbblackwallstreet.com. That's resurrectingbblackwallstreet.com. I hope you'll support the film, and I hope you'll support each other. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. Please take care.
So what Dr. Boyce Watkins was, of course, reference to was Black Wall Street. I'm pretty sure many of you have heard what happened in Tulsa and some other cities that was thriving economically when it comes to black people. And of course, we're talking about economics in this regard, but um, I want to point out a couple of things because although I believe that there was a time period where it was super duper important for the so-called black person to thrive on their own because they were not getting help from outside help from anybody and they had to do it on their own, right? So diversity is a fact of life, is a way of life, right? In the United States of America, we pride ourselves on having this kind of unified thing, whether that's religion, whether that's economics, race, culture, etc. Right. So I think a couple of things can be true at the same time, right? I do believe that people who feel, and although we might feel oppressed, right, at the end of the day, we live in one of the richest countries, one of the most freest countries, right? I wouldn't call it oppression. What I would call it is a lack of opportunity to build together. So if you want to build and segregate and have a space that is directed towards the black community, then I think that you can do that because you see the Jews do it, you see the Asians do it, you see other people do it. So I don't think it's anything wrong with that. But constantly expecting somebody else from the outside to come and give you dollars is what the problem is. And I do believe that building from the outside, so that would quell all the excuses and things that people want to bring up when it comes to running in an oppression Olympics, as often casted as. Um, so I do believe that the opportunity is there to build from the inside, right? I think the problem lies is when you want to build from the inside but you want outside help. That is where the problem comes. And then when you constantly blaming issues on an outside community, when we have the tools, we have the money, we have everything that's necessary to do things from within. So that's my 2 cents. Let's go to another video, and Dr. Umar Johnson is going to make a pretty profound point, I think. So let's get to it.
United States of America only desegregated, it never integrated. Okay. And there's a difference between integration and desegregation. Desegregation is the legal removal of all restrictions and barriers that allow you access to a certain aspect of society. We're only eliminating the legality that keeps you from participating. Integration is when I guarantee you access. America never integrated. America only desegregated. So, for example, if you go into New York City, you go into Philadelphia, you'll see schools that are 85, 95% black, right? They were desegregated. There's no law that says white children can't come here. or black children can't go to the predominantly white school. They were desegged. They were not integrated. Because if they were integrated, you would see a 50-50 split. So America desegregated, America never integrated. With that being said, when we go back to 1954 and the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court decision, May 17th, 1954, actually came out of undergrad the same day. That's why I remember the date. When the Supreme Court said race has no place in American education, white people started taking their children out the public school system and putting them into the private school system. The largest expansion of private schools in American history took place between when? 1954 and 1974. White people said, if our children have to go to class with these Negroes, they're not going to class at all. So the private school movement, you had private schools before May 17th, 1954, but you had an explosion in private schools after May 17th, 1954. White people started taking their children out. Now, for the white people who could not afford to do that, the federal government gave them a program by which they could resegregate special education in 1975. So 20 years after school desegregation, they gave us special ed. So now let the black children into the white school building, but say they can't keep up with the white kids. They're retarded. They're intellectually disabled. They're emotionally disturbed. They have ADHD. They have conduct disorder. They have oppositional defiant disorder. First,
I think Dr. Umar Johnson made a pretty good point on the difference between desegregation and integration. What I do disagree with him on is the fact that I do believe integration actually happened because we were allowed into different spaces. Like, remember when during Jim Crow, right? We wasn't allowed at all. Well, integration means that you are allowed, right? I think the key factor is that you're allowed, but they don't have to like it, right? They don't have to treat you with open arms. They don't have to roll out the red carpet for you, right? I think that's a difference. And I think that is one thing that still upset a lot of people who expect a certain treatment from another human being of a different race, right? They feel like that and rightfully so, right? I'm the person that believes that a universal law is love, right? And love shouldn't be dictated on gender, race, culture, or what have you, right? So I think that's a fair point. But at the end of the day, I mean, the reality is the reality, right? Like when people want to enclose themselves, they want to have something private for themselves, then this is how they're going to treat. So I definitely believe that, of course, he's on money when you talk about desegregation, that's lawful, right? But integration definitely happened, right? Races and culture definitely mix, right? I mean, you can see it with the food, with the language, with the fashion, etc., right? So it definitely happened. But what we often see that yes, we integrated, but what we didn't do is we didn't have a plan to maintain ownership. We didn't have a plan to make sure that certain things would stay within the culture and the community. And I think that was the biggest factor and the reason why integration didn't work out in our benefit, because we did not control what we should have controlled. All right. Move to my last clip, and one of my favorites to listen to, Dr. Claude Anderson. Hey, you're going to enjoy this if you haven't seen it. Let's get it.
To be perfectly honest, even though I got enough degrees in human behavior and dynamics and sociology, I don't even understand that thrust. Because, see, integration itself is countermanding any possibility of you ever acquiring power and wealth. You cannot empower yourself at the same time you integrate. Integration, Paul, means disintegration. It means reducing yourself to a micro speck. Because in a society where the majority will win and rule and the minority will lose and suffer, why would anybody want to integrate? Integration is making black folk a guest. Integration means I will make you a guest. I will make you a guest in something that's owned and controlled by other people. I'll make you a guest in white suburbs, in white schools, in white businesses, in white organizations, in the white government. See, black folk can never acquire wealth and power as long as they're integrating. And what's going to happen, though, with this whole concept of integration, it's going to hold blacks in abeyance until these other groups, competing groups, come in and wipe them out and push them into a subclass structure. Now, you mentioned the busings, for instance. See, that's one of the dumbest things I've ever seen happen. See, my family, as an example, was a part of the family that's only black bus line that you've ever had in America. The only black chartered bus line you've ever had in America. And that was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. That was a safe bus company. We didn't have just one bus, 3 buses, 5 buses, or 10 buses. We had over 500 buses. And our buses didn't just service the black neighborhoods. They serviced the black neighborhoods and the white neighborhoods, period. Mm-hmm. We put the white bus company out of business there. I mean, that was a Duke Power Company. Duke Power Company, named just like Duke University, and Duke Electric Company. We put them out of business because we ran a very competitive bus line. Now, our bus line was vertically integrated for black folk, which gave us a power base, a wealth base, an employment base. We hired our own people. We bought our own buses, repaired our own buses, operated our own buses, had our own drivers, our own mechanics, and we serviced both neighborhoods. But what put us out of business was not an inability for us to compete. It was a fact that blacks decided to integrate down in Montgomery. And when Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks integrated the buses there, rather than going in and buying the bus line from the whites and taking it over and operating it under black control, they decided that it was much better in the context of integration, which was social. Let's just socialize with whites. If whites are sitting on the front of the bus and we sit on the back, let's move up front with them and let's integrate with them. Let's intermix and make it a social issue. And so black folk then moved from the back of the bus to the front of the bus. Like, who really cares?
There is a growing number.
But let me finish the point now. Here's what happened now. When that movement moved up to North Carolina and came to North Carolina, the blacks in North Carolina says, we also want to sit on the front of the bus. And in North Carolina, we said, but we don't have any white buses you can sit on the front of the white bus. They said, well, why don't you all get some white buses so we can sit on the front of them? So our bus company went out of business. So then they brought in white buses, and now whites run the bus line. And the same thing happened to our black cab companies and our black movie theaters and our black restaurants. And everything black went out of existence because black folk see integration as being a social issue, and somehow they feel if they get closer to the white society, they're elevating their status, and they're not. They're disintegrating.
And there you have it, one of the more brilliant minds in modern history, breaking it down. And at the end of the day, it comes back to economics, right? Because particularly in the system that we live in, which is capitalism, everything goes back to money, right? Everything goes back to ownership, right? Do you control what it is that, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to the things that are necessary, right? Do you control it? Do you own it? Are you able to sell it? Right. So at the end of the day, it always comes back to economics. And the biggest thing, why integration hurt the so-called black person is because we gave everything away that we used to own at one point in time. Right. Dr. Claude Anson spoke on it. Right. So we used to own buses. We used to own restaurants, barbershops, et cetera, et cetera. Now, of course, we have some of that ownership now, but it's in small fragments. Right. It's more so in what we consider quote unquote black cities, right? Like your Chicago's, your Atlanta's, your Detroit's, your Washington DC's, right? But for the most part, we're talking about ownership, and we're talking about the fact that, or we talk about consumerism, right? The fact that the things that we spend the most money on, we have no stake or no ownership in, right? So the things that we actually contribute to more creatively, whether that's the sports arena, whether that's the hair arena, whether that's the music industry, right? Where is the ownership, right? So he brought up a good point as far as like the so-called black person. We feel like the closer we get to whiteness, the better we are. That's the reason why we buy these white brands, the Christian Dior's, the Louis Vuittons, and things of that nature, and we brag about it, right? But where are the so-called black brands, right? So that's the reason why I feel like integration bad, and I thought these gentlemen made the case as well. So hopefully, you gain a different perspective. Let me know what you think, though, man. Comment, subscribe, like, do all that good stuff. Share the video. What do you think? Do you think integration was bad for the so-called black person? Let me know. Okay. But of course, as always, I'm you and me, love all of you, love eternal. Remember, the worst thing you can do is lie to yourself. Hey, and we out. Deuces. One love.